إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده ربي لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه ومختاره من خلقه وحبيبه، وأشهد أنه قد بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وكشف الله به الأمة ومحى الظلمة. أرسله الله رحمة للعالمين ومنارا للسالكين حجة على العباد أجمعين. أهدى الله به من الضلالة وأنقذ به من الهلكة وبصر به من الجلالة. فصلوات الله وتسليماته وتبريكاته عليه وعلى أهل بيته وأصحابه إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فأوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله تعالى، فإنها وصية الله للأولين والآخرين، حيث قال الله تعالى: ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، ولقد وصينا الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم وإياكم أن اتقوا الله، وإن تكفروا فإن لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض، وكان الله غنيا حميدا. قال الله تعالى: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن خير الكلام كلام الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، شر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. أعاذني الله وإياكم من النار. وما قل وكفى خير مما كثر وألهى، وإنما توعدون لآت وما أنتم بمعجزين. أما بعد، يقول الله تبارك وتعالى بعد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله يأمركم أن تؤدوا الأمانات إلى أهلها، وإذا حكمتم بين الناس أن تحكموا بالعدل، إن الله نعم ما يعظكم به، إن الله كان سميعا بصيرا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم، فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر، ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. وقال تعالى: الذين إن مكناهم في الأرض أقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وأمروا بالمعروف ونهوا عن المنكر، ولله عاقبة الأمور. صدق الله العظيم. وأخرج الإمام أحمد والنسائي والترمذي وابن حبان في صحيحه عن كعب بن مالك الأنصاري رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: ما ذئبان جائعان أرسلا في غنم بأفسد لها من حرص المرء على المال والشرف لدينه. وفي رواية عن جابر رضي الله عنه: ما ذئبان ضاريان باتا في غنم غاب رعاؤها بأفسد للناس من حب الشرف والمال لدين المؤمن، أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Respected brothers and sisters, today's khutbah has to do with how Islam and how Allah Azza wa Jal taught our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam tools and skills and qualities that actually are required for those who are in power. And now, since it is election season, I'm not here to speak about what is the mindset of a believer in just what's happening in the upcoming election in the Super Tuesday of November. But as we know, as Muslims, we have seen what wrong leadership has done to people all around the world, including this country itself. And the solution to me, in my opinion, and I'm no scholar or mufti, But it is not to play with this established system. It is not to think that this system, if we find a person who will represent us, who is Muslim, is going to get us our equal rights or justice. And here at the same time, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we should do a January 6th take over the Capitol. That's not my point. My point is that Allah Azza wa Jalla sent a religion that is comprehensive in every part of life. We should not have a mindset that our religion is applied within the four walls of the masjid, and then outside of the masjid, then khalas, we're at the mercy of whatever Republican or Democrat is in the White House. But we have to understand how comprehensive this religion is. It was meant for those same people who are governing Capitol Hill and at the state level and the local level. We should not have low hopes and low ambition and think they'll never change. How are they going to become Muslim? They're so evil, they're so crooked, da da da. If we have certainty and conviction, and we establish in our communities places where men and women get connected to Allah through the Book of Allah, through the Sunnah of the Messenger, then every person in society at any status level, we have at least to try to convey that message. And Islam is applicable in every walk of life and every point. So the ayat we read, who Allah intended power for, He mentioned in Surah An-Nisa, O you who believe, obey Allah, obey His Messenger, and those who have authority over you. In Islam, the true ruler should be one from the scholars. It is not from just somebody who may have, mashallah, a PhD from this Ivy League university in political science. That it is actually someone who knows the religion of Allah, because that is what Allah intended for people to be governed by. Whatever new nawazil and developments come in century or era after era, the mujtahidun will do ijtihad. But the foundation is to know what did Allah and His Messenger say. And then there are other requirements that they mention, being the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Immatu fi Quraysh, they should be from the Prophet ﷺ's tribe of Quraysh and whatnot. But the focus here is knowing what Allah and His Messenger taught us. That's who power goes to. The ulama, in reality, should be the umara. But if you look in history, whenever the scholars were not consulted in Islamic history, and they were not either given the rulership or they were not consulted, then a lot of deviation happened. A lot of problems came within the Muslims themselves in their religion, and also in their relations with non-Muslims in neighboring lands. And as we know, the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that how the stages of rulership will be in his life, and then after his death. So he mentioned, meaning that there will be a khilafah ala kitabillahi wa sunnah for approximately 40 years. If you look from the khilafah of Abu Bakr, the death of the Prophet, until Hassan radiallahu anhu, when he abdicated, that's exactly 40 years. Then he said after that, it will become mulk, it will become a kingdom that is inherited, passed down generation. Then after that stage, it will become sultanun ja'ir. The ruler will be a tyrannical and power-hungry, unfair, unjust ruler. But he gave glad tidings, and then a time will come, تكون الخلافة على كتاب الله وسنة على سنة النبي. There will become a time, even before the Mahdi and the Dajjal's appearance and Isa alayhi salam, the Khilafah will return. But why are we here in the United States, respected brothers? Some of us have history, our ancestors have been here for Allah knows how long, some of us are new. But our mindset should not be as sometimes as reality, as lisanul hal, is not what the maqal, the people say, but our mindset, our actions speak a lot more than our words. So that, alhamdulillah, this country, I can work, I can amass wealth, I don't have to deal with a foreign invasion, and khalas. Allah is in control, but we should think, what if Allah asks us, what did you do on the Day of Judgment? What did you do to spread this Islam in this land? So an example is that, as the poet, he says, إِذَا يَلُومُ الطَّبِيبُ الْمَرِيضَ بِدَائِهِ فَبِمَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُؤَمِّرُ الدَّوَاءُ. Imagine you go to a doctor and you want to get treated for an illness, a condition, and the doctor criticizes you. It's your fault. you should have ate this, you should have stayed away from that, you shouldn't have smoked, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't. The poet, he said, if the doctor blames the sick person for his sickness, then who will the sick person hope in medicine from? It's very profound. What I'm trying to say about this is, as Muslims, we should be those that are the doctors for those non-Muslims who are looking for the truth. But it will not happen by birthright. It will not happen just because I was born Muslim or I said the Shahada. We have to acquire these traits. Just imagine 2% of the country is Muslim. I haven't seen the recent census, but we were around close to 9 or 10 million last time. And how many? 350 plus million people. Imagine if the only people they look for in the community is the Imam. Hey Imam, I need you to give da'wah to this person. Hey Imam, we all have to acquire these qualities because this is our share of honor. قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا هُوَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. Allah tells us to be proud and rejoice in two things in the Quran. The virtue or bounty of Allah is Islam, and the mercy is Quran. This is something that makes us have dignity, honor. And that's why Abu al-Hasan Ali Nadwi rahimahullah, he mentioned in one of the books he wrote about the da'wah of the prophets, when Yusuf alayhi salam was in prison, the people observed his behavior. He was an upright person, alayhi salam. So those two men who saw the dream, they asked him the dream, the interpretation of the dream, إِنَّا نَرَاكَ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. We see you from the good doers. So tell us what is مَا تَأْبِيرُهَا. They said, the men in the prison, وَدَّخَلَ مَعَهُ سِجْنَ فَتَيَانِ قال أحدهما إني أراني أعصر خمرا وقال آخر إني أراني أحمل فوق رأسي خبزا تأكل الطير منه نبئنا بتأويله إنا نراك من المحسنين. One of them saw the dream that I was pouring wine for the king, and the other one saw the crows were eating bread over my head. What is the interpretation of this dream? Yusuf alayhi salam, out of wisdom of Al-Hasan al-Nadwi, he said before he told them the answer, he gave them reassurance. And he said the example of a da'i is the one, he doesn't call to himself like out of pride, but because of knowing the religion of Allah, he brings reassurance to those who find confusion, they find doubt, they find uncertainty, they find ignorance. He said, قال لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما. He said, no food is going to come to you two, whether it's the bread on the head or the wine to pour, that you will be sustained with قبل إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما. Unless I tell you what is the news or the information and symbolism and the meaning of your dream. And what did he say? ذَلِكَ مِمَّا عَلَّمَنِي رَبِّي. That is what my Lord taught me. إِنِّي تَرَكْتُ مِلَّةَ قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ كَافِرُونَ. I have left the religion of those who do not believe in Allah, and وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ كَافِرُونَ, and they disbelieve in the hereafter. So, going into the hadith that I mentioned at the beginning after some of the ayat, but before we go into that, there's a quote by Abu Faraj Ali ibn Abdurrahman al-Jawzi rahimahullah in one of his books, الشفاء في مواعظ الملوك والخلفاء, is the cure for the advice to the khulafa, the caliphs, and the muluk, the kings. So he says, اعلم وفقك الله. Know, may Allah give you success and ability. أنه كلما ارتفع المقام ازدادت المخاطر فيه. That every time your status goes up in society, the danger and the risk with that also increases. ألا ترى أن الربح في ركوب البحر وفيه خطر. He gave the metaphor example. In his time, he lived in the 5th century or 6th century of the Hijrah, which is more than 1,000 years or so, 900 years before. He said, do you know when you now take a business trip with freight on a ship going in the ocean, you can carry more cargo in a ship than you can on a land caravan, right? But the danger is more, he says, because if that ship sinks, there goes your entire inventory. And he says, وَمَرْتَبَةُ الْفَتْوَى غَايَةُ الْعُلْمِ وَفِيهِ خَطَرٌ. He said, also in the religion, those scholars who have been entrusted with giving fatwa, giving religious edicts, he said this is one of the highest levels of knowledge, but there's also danger because they are accountable for what fatwa they give. وَكَذَلِكَ السُّلْطَانُ. Now he says, similarly is the ruler or the sultan. فإذا سلم التاجر من البحر, when the trader is saved from the threat or the risk of drowning in the sea, والمفتي من الزلل, and the one who gives fatwa is saved from slipping and erring, والسلطان من الحيف, and the sultan is saved from deviating, لم يزاحم في فضيلته, no one can compare to that person's rank. So we're just trying to say there is danger in going into power. There is danger in going into power. Now next, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that we started with is mentioned in the book of Sunan Nasa'i, the Musnad of Ahmad, the Sunan of Tirmidhi, Sahih ibn Hibban. The Prophet ﷺ gave an amazing metaphor example. He said, no two hungry wolves that are left alone with a flock of sheep that are unattended. Two wolves only, he said. But it refers to what are those dangers coming. He says, two hungry wolves left alone with a flock of sheep unattended is not more dangerous for the religion of a man than his greed for wealth and his love of fame and power. These two things, they will destroy the religion of a person. And the example that I heard from Shaykh Abdul Razak al-Badr in Masjid Nabawi last year, when he was giving Dars of Riyadh al-Salihin, he said that why did the Prophet say two wolves? He didn't say lion or hyena or hippopotamus, whatever animal that's a predator. He said the wolf is different than the lion. The lion, maybe the whole pack will find one animal and eat that animal. But the wolf will go after every single sheep. Even it can't eat the sheep, but it will still go after. And this is the danger we see of power. And what I'm trying to say as a remedy is that if people know Allah and they know the reckoning of the Day of Judgment, then this will check them in order. In this dunya, how many kings got away with injustice? How many kings imprisoned the person who tried to indict them or attack them? Or how many people out of love of power, they have eliminated any threat from them? But on the Day of Judgment, there is no threat. There is no escape from the punishment of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that إِذَا جَاءَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ لَا يُمْسِكُ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ السَّبْعَ وَالْأَرَاضِينَ السَّبْعَ بيمينه ويقول أين الملوك أين الجبابرة أين المتكبرين. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يهزهما, Allah will, in a way that befits His Majesty, He will grab the skies and the earth in His hand and He will shake them and He will say, أنا الملك, I am the king today. Where are the oppressive rulers? Where are the tyrannical rulers? There will be no one to rule on that day besides Allah. So I wish there was more time to explain this, but Ibn Rajab, he explains that what are the categories of greed of wealth, and I wanted to focus on another thing, is not just those in political power, but even in the economic system, there is something known as a shuh. Shuh is a type of greed, he explains, rahimahullah, that تناول ما ليس له ظلما وعدوانا, that he achieves in his pursuit of wealth that which is not his share out of injustice and out of enmity, min malin or ghayr, be it of wealth or something or besides wealth. حتى قيل إنه رأس المعاصي كلها. Shuh, greed, to take wealth unjustly. One is to take it from haram out of greed, and two is not the person's right. That they say it is the head of all evil or all sins. And he said this is what Ibn Mas'ud defined this shuh to be. And the Salaf and the previous generations, they describe shuh and al-bukhl. Bukhl is to just hold on what's in your possession. But shuh is to want to take it from others. And there's so many examples we see. Because of the love of money, people do the most heinous of things. Even if a Muslim is not straight, we see just 20-something years ago when the war of terror was on, for the love of money, some would join the military and try to go and kill their own Muslim brother out of love of money. Some people will become an informant. Some people will do things that you would not think of, even those that are not Muslim, in the medical healthcare system. That, the big pharma is funding medical schools, is funding all these things, and you go for one illness to a doctor and he says, take this prescription, and then it brings you all these side effects, and then you go back, he says, take this for your side effects, and it's a never-ending system. We've seen what happened with COVID and vaccines and whatnot. This greed, this world is not meant for our desires. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لو كان لابن آدم وادي من ذهب حب أن يكون وادي. If the human being had a valley of gold, imagine just if this row was full of gold. We couldn't even count what the value of that is. He said a valley of gold. he would still love a second. And if, in one narration, if he had 2 valleys, he would want a third. وَلَنْ يَمْلَأَ فَاهُ إِلَّا التُّرَابُ وَيَتُوبُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَنْ تَابَ. That the only thing that will fill the mouth of the son of Adam's greed is the dirt of his own grave. That's when you realize what really values. Inshallah, we'll continue in the next أقول ما تسمعون. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن والسنة ونفعني وإياكم بما فيه من العلم والحكمة واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا الله. الحمد لله على إحسانه وأشكره على فضله وامتنانه ولا إله إلا الله تعظيما لشانه وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الداعي إلى رضوانه صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وإخوانه أما بعد. So my dear respected brothers and sisters, there's a famous saying that power and money changes a person. But in reality, as the saying goes, it only shows who that person really is. Power and money will show who that person was all along. And the great example is our Master Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That in their time, when they were given wealth, they used to return it. There's a whole chapter that Muhammad Yusuf al-Kandahlawi, the scholar of the 20th century from Delhi, India, he wrote Hayat al-Sahaba, 4-volume work. It's even been translated in English. It's an amazing work. I highly encourage it. But there's a chapter, he said, Raddul Mal, the returning of wealth. And the first example he gave is the Prophet ﷺ. Do you know our Prophet ﷺ, as reported by Imam al-Tirmidhi, with a chain of Hasan, great, a good chain of narration from the Sahabi Abu Umama radiallahu anhu. He said, قال عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال عرض علي ربي ليجعل لي بطحاء مكة ذهبا وفي رواية فضة قلت لا يا رب ولكن أشبع يوما وأجوع يوما وقال 3 أو نحو هذا فإذا جعت تضرعت إليك وذكرتك وإذا شبعت شكرتك وحمدتك. The Prophet ﷺ said, my Lord presented to me to make the mountains and the valleys of Mecca gold. If you go to now Hajj and Umrah, you see how big those mountains are. Imagine all that was gold. And the Prophet ﷺ was so generous, Allah knows best if it's accurate, but one of my friends told me some people tried to count what's called the net worth. All the wealth the Prophet ﷺ gave as sadaqah in his life. And he gave, today would be roughly around $25 million. And when he died, he had to borrow oil from his neighbor to lit his lamp, Aisha said, in his house. That's how much sadaqah he gave. But imagine if Allah gave him all that gold and he would have gave sadaqah. But what was his response? He said, I refused. And I said, oh my Lord, I want to be hungry one day and I want to be satiated one day. As for the day that I am hungry and fast, I will humble myself to you and I will remember you. And the day that I'm satiated, I will thank you and praise you. This was his example. Now let's look at the example of Sahaba radiallahu anhu, and I will conclude with that. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he became Khalifa, as mentioned by Imam al-Bayhaqi rahimahullah, that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu gave a khutbah to the people and he praised Allah and he extolled him and he said, indeed the most intelligent people of taqwa, he said, and then he didn't finish mentioning what was the statement of Abu Bakr. He said, فَلَمَّا أَصْبَحَ غَدَى إِلَى السُّوقِ. The next morning after the khutbah, Abu Bakr went to the market. And imagine he's Khalifa. So Umar told him, أين تريد? Where are you going, Abu Bakr? He said, السوق. He said, I'm going to the market. فقد جاءك. So Abu Bakr, Umar told him, قد جاءك ما يشغلك عن السوق. You have a responsibility as a Khalifa that is more important than the market. So he said, Subhanallah, يشغلني عن عيالي. He said, do you think the Khalifa, role of Khalifa is going to make me independent of having to support my dependents, my children and family? So Abu Bakr, he said, نَفْرِضُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ قَالَ وَيْحَ عُمَرْ. So Umar said, we're going to make a portion from the Baytul Mal, the Muslim treasury, to you. Imagine today if there was a president, he didn't take anything from the state treasury and he worked his own hustle or trade. So he said, woe to you, O Umar, I am afraid that Allah يَسَعُنِي أَنْ أَكُلَ مِنْ هَذَا الْمَالِ شَيْئًا. He said, I'm afraid I don't want to eat none of this wealth, O Umar. So anyway, it so happened that he had to take, because the Sahaba forced him to take from the Baytul Mal. And there is a story of Umar, very briefly. It said that the Prophet ﷺ sent for Umar radiallahu anhu and wanted to gift him some wealth. And then is mentioned by Imam Malik, he says, from Ata ibn Yasar. So what happened, Umar returned the wealth that the Prophet gave him. فقال له رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لما رددت. Oh Umar, the Prophet said, why did you return this wealth, oh Umar? So he said that, why did you return this wealth, oh Umar? I'm sorry, I lost my paper. So Umar radiallahu anhu, so he said, why did you return the wealth, O Umar? So he said, O Messenger of Allah, أَلَيْسَ أَخْبَرْتَنَا أَنَّ خَيْرًا لِأَحَدِنَا أَلَّا يَأْخُذَ مِنْ أَحَدٍ شَيْئًا. O Prophet, didn't you tell us it's better not to take anything from anyone? So the Prophet explained, there is a difference between asking for the wealth and being given it without asking. And then Umar said, from now on, I promise I will never ask for anything, and if I am gifted something, I will take it. My point, respected brothers and sisters, forgive me for my errors, may Allah forgive me first, is that these were people who were concerned with akhirah. So they became the rulers that the world reveres till now, until the day of judgment, inshallah. And that's why in the early stages of the war on terror, everything, the fear was a Muslim was a quote-unquote terrorist or a physical threat or violent. This is what the disbelievers feared. But if we look at how Allah gave victory to the ummah, it was through their taqwa and their righteous actions. And then when they attained that strength and wealth and ability, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them victory. That's what the Prophet said, نُصِرْتُ بِالرُّعْبِ مَسِيرَةُ شَهْرٍ. He was 1 month's journey away from the non-Muslims, and they were already afraid in their hearts of them. And that's why Allah said of the Sahaba, لَأَنْتُمْ أَشَدُّ رَهْبَةً فِي صُدُورِهِمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ, if I'm not mistaken. The Jews of Medina, Allah said, you, O Sahaba, are more of, they fear you, O Sahaba, more than they fear Allah. That is because there are people that don't understand. So that's why the poet, he said, دعامة السيف لم تقوي دعامتها ما لم تكن حاثلتها دومة الكتب. That what establishes a society, before he says ruling by the sword, the ruling of the sword will never be strong unless that state is ruled and understands the knowledge of books. So anything I said good is from Allah and Allah alone. Anything I said wrong is from me and shaitan, Allah and his messenger, free from me. إني أوصيكم بأمر بدأ الله بنفسي وثنى به الملائكة المقربين من قدسي وثلث بكم أيها المؤمنون حيث قال عز من قائل عليما إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وبارك وسلم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين اللهم إنا نسألك عيشة نقية وميتة سوية ومرض غير مخزن ولا فاضح اللهم ول أمورنا خيارنا ولا تول أمورنا شرارنا اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك يا رب العالمين اللهم انصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين اللهم انصر دينك وكتابك وسنة نبيك وعبادك المجاهدين في كل مكان في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها يا رب العالمين اللهم انصر المستضعفين من المسلمين في كل مكان في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها يا رب العالمين لا سيما في فلسطين وأكناف بيت المقدس وفي اليمن وفي لبنان وفي السودان وفي العراق وفي لبنان وفي سوريا وفي تركستان وفي بورما وفي كل مكان يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل المسلمين ظاهرين على الحق لا يضرهم من خذلهم حتى يأتي أمرك اللهم إنا نسألك حسن الخاتمة اللهم بارك لنا في أهلنا وبارك لنا في قلوبنا وأموالنا وديارنا وتجارتنا اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما لعلمنا اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في دين الدنيا والآخرة اللهم إنا نسألك من كل خير سألك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ونعوذ بك من كل شر ما استعاذك منه نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أنت المستعان وعليك البلاء ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله أقيم الصلاة.